Welcome to the A Minute to Midnight show. This is Tony from aminutomidnight.com. Don't forget, visit our website, and I'll just say there's been some pretty good articles by Matt, my friend Matt, who writes and been posting them on the A Minute to Midnight website lately about the various deceptions that I think people should know about and how to identify them and combat them. And also we run A Minute to Midnight by donations completely, 100%. We don't do any YouTube ads or anything like that, so donations are always appreciated as well. So visit aminutomidnight.com. And now I want to offer a very warm welcome to Stan Deyo back on the A Minute to Midnight show. Stan was a guest on the show a few times, but it's been ages, Stan.
It has. I was just last night watching a movie, Crocodile Dundee, and thinking back to the old Aussie days and how long it had been I talked to anybody down south there.
Well, I'm not an Aussie, of course, but I have actually talked to you about those Aussie days that you had, basically working for the Illuminati, really, at the time.
Yeah, I guess it was, yeah.
Yeah, and I must let people know where that interview is, because it's absolutely fascinating for people, I think, that haven't heard it, to listen to that, your background down there.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. You can dig that out of the archives there and point people to it, and it's pretty timely now then with all the stuff that's going on out in the world.
Totally, yeah, and the whole thing with, I think, potential alien deceptions and things like that, and all the UFO sightings and that, and a lot of people wouldn't realise that you actually worked on UFO projects back in the 70s.
No, I guess they wouldn't. As much as you tell them, it kind of goes in one ear and out the other, and people tend to go back to sleep and forget about it until, of course, something happens in the sky, and I think that's going to happen fairly shortly this year if the Middle East situation develops what I think it will. Right at the height of us wiping out the planet with nuclear war, I think it's when they're going to put this planned deception with, the quote-unquote alien space fleet ending and claiming to be friends of Earth and all that kind of stuff. Just a great deception. I actually did write about that and details about that in an appendix added to the Cosmic Conspiracy Final Edition 2010. But, it's probably about 5 weeks away from reprint at the moment. We're doing other books first. Holly's Dare to Prepare book, and because that's really taken off again with the situation being so bad.
Yeah.
So now I've also started writing volume 2 of the Vindicator Scrolls, which talks about the changes, the alteration of the age of the universe, the expanding Earth, and then how that affects by discovery of the Garden of Eden and Atlantis, and identifying the Antichrist of this age. So that'll be quite an interesting book, but I'm probably 6 months out on finishing that. It's a big book.
Well, that does sound interesting. And yeah, I was thinking I must try and get one of your reprint when you do the copy of the Cosmic Conspiracy, since I don't own it. One of my very close friends has got an original, the original edition of the book, which is a long time old, but you did update it somewhat in 2010, didn't you?
Oh, and before that, yeah, I've had a couple of updates, but one of the important things, even if you've got just the first edition, which is in, I think, blue and white cover, on page 200, I've kept it in every edition. The first 200 pages, everything is on the same page, same statement. I just added stuff. So on page 200, there's a, is it 200? Yeah, I think so, 200. It's where I have the map of the Club of Rome, dividing up the Earth in 1978. The commission report there in Italy at the Club of Rome, obviously, had divided the world up into 10 regions or superstates, using financial, social, population density, food supplies, water, all these different factors they allocated to all the nations of the world, and then grouped them into 10 regions which have common factors. And as a result, we have a plan for a world government with 10 regions, which is very similar to what we saw in the 10 toes of Nebuchadnezzar's dream when he had Daniel interpret for him, the statue of the man with the legs of iron and then the feet of iron and the toes of iron and clay mixed, 5 toes on each foot, left and right legs of the revived Roman Empire, which would be out of the Club of Rome, and the whole world would come under the entire new Roman Empire out of Rome. So I'm paying very close attention to this Pope and his activities and how long they'll let him stay in power with what he's doing. It's just obviously not Christian behavior at all.
No, he's certainly, well, he's a Jesuit and the first Jesuit Pope, and boy, it's certainly moving towards a socialistic type plan anyway.
Well, a world government, I mean, he's telling the United States, you guys quit worrying about those illegal immigrants, bring them in. We're trying to help these poor people. You can't think, nationally anymore. You got to think globally. And so it's your duty to take in these people. Right.
Yeah, like the Vatican will tear down their wall.
Oh, what is that, like 40 feet tall all around the Vatican?
Yeah.
And they built it to keep out the pirates and stuff in the old days, from looting the treasury.
Yeah.
So they can have a wall, but it's rules for them and not for us.
Yeah. Yes, totally. But no, there are a lot of very interesting things happening at the moment in the world, moving us towards world government. It seems to be at an increased pace, really.
Doesn't it? It's just a rocket pace, just incredible.
Yep, totally is. Yes.
We were lucky to see a news article on that once a week, and now then it's how many times a day do you hear that mentioned? It's just incredible.
Well, you can't keep up. That's what I find. There's just too much to keep up with, and I've been sent stuff to research about what's called ID 2020, which is a United Nations thing, and Microsoft's involved as well. Which it looks like, more steps in the mark of the beast direction in the whole biometric identification and so on. There are just so many things that are happening, all right, that point in that direction.
Yeah, well, 2020 is only, year and a half, 2 years away.
Yes, it is. I think their full plan is 2030, which is, everything is geared towards this 2030, including Mohammed bin Salman's 2030 vision, and then you've got the Agenda 2030, and it seems to be a date that they picked, and they have these interim other dates like 2020, but I think 2030 appears to be, a pretty significant date that they're all working towards.
Well, if we make it to that date before things happen, I'll be surprised because all the other factors in Christian and Jewish prophecy do point to the beginning of the tribulation before that time. But, I'm not going to go anywhere if I'm wrong. I mean, it's, but it just seems like the world can't wait that long for crises to come to a head, forcing a world government. And, the leaders could agree on it under duress, I'm sure, like in a United Nations thing, but it's not the people. And the people have to want to have this new world government, the new one world religion, the common money for everybody and all that kind of stuff. They have to want that. And peace from nuclear war. The people have to want that. So all this stuff that's maneuvering around the world now that is an effort to get the consciousness of the man in the street in all the nations to the point where he says, we need to solve this problem on a global basis, which is fine. But you and I both know that the only one that can do it properly and fairly is Jesus Christ himself. And that's not who's in charge of the planet right now.
No, and the thing is it could be done in stages. They may have initial stages, which I think will happen before 2030 for sure. But, who knows all the steps that it'll take there. And you mentioned nuclear war. And Dr. Teller, Edward Teller, we won't spend too much time on this, I don't think, but he was one of those that recruited you, wasn't he? And he was called the father of the H-bomb, I believe.
Yeah. He compiled or organized a team of researchers and developers into advanced physics, propulsion, anti-gravity, saucer craft, various other technologies to cut metals at one molecule width cuts and make solid openings in like openings in a wall that you can walk through and then the wall closes behind you. That kind of stuff. Some really advanced technology, but it was a multinational effort rather than United States effort because there were scientists and industrialists, engineers involved in this in Norway, in Canada, the United States, of course, Australia, New Zealand, some in Russia under Dr. Sakharov, who was Teller's equivalent over there, some in Germany, West Germany in the tunnels, and maybe some in the East Germany tunnels too. I'm not sure how far the tunnels went. And so you've got all these countries that were supplying men money, and technology to advance our knowledge of physics to a point where the people in these bases we had were just so far ahead of the technology that people even read about that it wasn't funny. It was like total separate worlds or culture. And this is, of course, when our underground bases we were doing that with people or beings that were from off the world. And the crowds of these that we supplied infrastructure for in exchange for a lot of technology finally started having battles with us in our underground bases and ran the human contingent out of these bases, most of them, perhaps all of them. And I'm only one of 2 or 3 people that I know of that was allowed to escape. They took our documentation, everything, and either gave it back to us or burned it so that the takeover of our records and stuff by governments wouldn't, finger us so that we could live longer and perhaps tell people like we're doing now what happened, in Teller's project and the result of what's coming now. I mean, I'm blessed to be able to be alive and to share it. And it took me a while to figure out why they let me escape, but that was why.
Why do you think they did let you do that? I mean, we have covered this in the other interview, a lot of this, which I think people have got to go back and listen. I'll try and find a link and maybe put it in the description. But why do you think they did, allow you to still be around?
Well, I'm pretty sure that the governments, elected governments of United States, Canada, Russia, all these that were involved in this project, did not know much at the time about what Teller's group was doing, because they knew, Teller's group, that elected officials and stuff are in office for a short time and then they get out of office, and they couldn't be trusted with the information that we had and where it was heading toward a global government. And so they let me live, I'm sure, my group down there in Australia, so that I could, in time, tell people what had happened and what we did, because our efforts were thwarted by these alien beings, which are now in contact with our elected governments, I'm pretty sure. And the people that were in the project, some are already dead a long time ago, they wanted us to be able to tell their story later when all this stuff happens, so they weren't forgotten, and the history of it could be released, because a lot of it was destroyed or locked up now. When I came back to this country from Australia, to get back in, I had to get help from the Secretary of Defense. He wasn't acting at the time, but he was with Clinton's administration, Dr. Jim Schlesinger. And it was his moving that got me my citizenship back, my passports and citizenship for all my children, and brought me home and kept me alive here. And of course, Jim's passed on now, but I guess keep your enemies close. They kept me here, and in spite of the fact that I've been telling and revealing this stuff, no one has knocked on my door. And as far as I know, hasn't oppressed us financially in any other way, except maybe Google on our ratings on our website. But other than that, they seem to have left me alone to share this information. And there's some parts of it, the details of anti-gravity that you wouldn't want to just make public to terrorists and things like that, or maybe free energy and stuff like that at this point. But with those exceptions, I've shared most of what went on and why it went on, and that's in that lecture that I did with you last time. So we can dredge that up and have a listen to that some other time.
Yes, just very quickly before we go off that, because you were in Australia, and I mean, you mentioned the Club of Rome in the map, and I think it was a captain. John Williams, was he the one in Australia that was your original supervisor, and was he part of the Club of Rome?
I don't know who this John was. I just don't know. I can't tell you for sure. I know that he was in favor with the Queen during World War II for recovering a bunch of gold bullion off the coast of New Zealand, and that's how he got his knighthood. But Captain Sir John Williams was a tall, stately gentleman of the olden days. You know, he was really cool. I did like him, and Sir Henry Somerset, his friend. They were both good guys in a lot of ways, but they did work behind the scenes. They did work Australian politics from the shadows. I sat there and I listened, so I know what they did. But their objectives, I think, were altruistic, and they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and so who knows what their real motivations were. But to me, they seem to be honorable men and dedicated to bettering the human condition on the whole planet. So, but they're all gone now, and I alone am left to tell the tale, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and of course you have detailed a lot of it in that book, The Cosmic Conspiracy, as well, which people should try and get a hold of when you do have it, the reprinted edition of it out there. Another thing that you've done, which is pretty fascinating, I think, was discovery, you believe, of where the Garden of Eden was. And maybe we could just discuss a little bit about that, because I think that's a fascinating discussion.
You know, Tony, it is. Your friend Haley, she mentioned that she could understand why people hadn't jumped on this, why more people didn't know about the discovery. And I'm with her on that. I pressed hard in 2016 in public lectures, and then in making a DVD of the lecture and documentation available to people. And, quite a few people, well, I'll say quite a few, probably 1,200 to 1,500 of them, something like that, bought copies of the DVD, and about 4,000 of them listened live when I was doing it. And you would have thought that they would have been, wow, across the country that Garden of Eden's been found, right? Our PR people even wrote to all the networks, network news, newspapers, and, various other societies that would be interested. And we heard nothing from any of these people, nothing. No one was interested. So a couple of years go by, and ABC Good Morning America does a 2-hour, I think it's 2 hours, maybe longer, live broadcast from the Ngoro crater, the alleged Garden of Eden in Africa. Do they comment on my research? No.
So they poached your research, basically.
Well, they just say it's Africa's Garden of Eden, not the Garden of Eden.
Right.
And so, I was glad that they at least showed drone flights over it and how it looked and things like that. But then this last year in, May, two of my friends, and here in the States, said, let's go to Africa. Let's go down to the Ngoro crater. Let's film inside the Garden of Eden, and let's find the waters of Eden that you recently discovered. And, we'll make a documentary. Well, we had trouble with our camera keeping it stable and some of the background noise, so it's taking me longer to edit that, but I am doing it slowly so that people can see what we saw. But to back up a bit, the original impetus I had to find the Garden of Eden was back in about 1987 or 88, I guess it was, in Australia. And strange it may sound, I was out in the evening in the back of the house. It was after sunset, and I was cleaning out the little cage enclosure we had for 2 rabbits that we had, pet rabbits. And I was leaning on my shovel, looking down at them, and I was thinking, this to them, this would be like looking up at God, and I wonder if God looked down on us at the Garden of Eden like this, the original pair. And as I was thinking about that, I looked up, and suddenly I had a sensation of motion all around me, like the earth spinning and everything else stopped. Everything just stopped, dead still around me. And then I felt like the moon, the stars, and everything else went click, 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 and locked into the movement of the earth at that moment. And we were all moving in concert. And it was such an unusual experience that I thought, Garden of Eden, I have to look into that, which, I did do, and published my first research paper on it in the Vindicator Scrolls Volume 1 in 1989. Again, time and circumstance, people weren't really interested. So between then and 2016, I did access a lot more data and on the internet and reports and all kinds of stuff that I needed to prove that the Garden of Eden was there. And I used the original Hebrew in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch in the English form. But I used the Hebrew wording to look at all the clues about where the Garden of Eden was. And I realized that to be fair about where I was locating, I would have to put the world, the world back together again with all the continents touching into that one big landmass called Pangaea by the geologists. And I realized that doing that, if I put all the continents back together according to the normal time frame of geology, that would have been 100 million years ago. And I thought, well, that's certainly further back than the Garden of Eden. Something's wrong with the timing here. Then I looked at the research of my friend Barry Satterfield, who's now moved from Australia up here to Washington State to continue his reports and research on the age of the universe and the speed of light. And his research is very good in that it says light and all electromagnetic radiation, like light, has to travel in something. It's a wave that travels in the fluid of space, ether space, whatever you want to call it. And the common wisdom about the origin of the universe is that there was a big bang and an explosion at the beginning of the universe. And all the mass of the universe, the galaxies that we see now, was all crammed down in this one little tiny space and then exploded. Now, at that time, the density of space, the fluid of space, was so great that the speed of light and other electromagnetic radiation was 10 with 60 zeros behind it faster than the speed of light now. And that the speed of light was dependent upon how dense space was. And so as the Big Bang expanded out and formed galaxies and planets and all that stuff, it kept expanding, the speed of light started to slow down to where we are now. And it wasn't a straight line slow down. It was a rapid, what they call like an exponential curve, just dropped like a rock and then flattened out where we are now. And when you apply this, you can generate that curve by measuring the speed of light in the last 200 years by various other methods that have been used and see that the speed of light is still decreasing. And you can plot the curve backwards. So when Barry did this, I saw, right, the Garden of Eden could have occurred within the last 12,000 years and perhaps even closer than that. So then I was able to look at, okay, the Earth, put all the continents back together. That could have happened before, that could have been the state that the Garden of Eden was planted in the Earth. Okay, what about the size of the Earth, the diameter? Because the research has been going on for the last 20 years into this shows that the continents, when you look at them like North America and Europe or South America and Africa, they would fit together, except you'd have to push a little bit hard in the middle because it's like an orange slice of empty space in between if you try to match the coastlines up. So then people realize that if you shrink the surface of the Earth down 70 to 75% of what it is now, then the continents, the curve in them would match and you could touch them without pushing them together. They just touch. So I thought, right, this means that I have to create a smaller model of the Earth, 75% of the diameter it is now. I've got to say that it was created and that Pangaea existed less than 10,000 years ago. And that the continental drift that they call it now is really the end of a catastrophic explosion or event that suddenly forced all the nations and continents apart rapidly until they started to slow down, which is where we are now at so many inches per year. So I set the framework there. Those are the fundamentals that I built my search for Eden on. So once I had reconstructed the Earth and corrected a problem that I saw with India, and that problem is this: India, people think that was the original shape of it, even in Pangaea, that it was that size, that shape. But when you look at the impact of a large asteroid, I mean a large sucker, about 15 miles in diameter, on the southeast coast of India, you see that it caused the skin of the Earth there, the crust, to push upwards from the impact, to push upwards into China and form the Himalaya mountains. So I had to pull the tip of India, in Ceylon, had to pull them down to where they belonged onto the ocean floor where you can see where they used to be. So that was something I had to correct. And in doing so, I found that asteroid, the Kudapa asteroid impact zone, which geologists in Australia and India and a lot of places have been looking for to find. They couldn't find it, but I found the impact zone. Anyway, so that let me put the world all together again. And then when the continents were together and India was stretched out where it belonged, I could start to locate the rivers that Genesis talks about that came out of the Garden of Eden. There was one great river that came out of Eden, and then it formed the headwaters when it broke apart of, four distinct regions of the planet. And the Bible tells you that one of them was famous for gold, and another one was famous for something or known for something else, and it goes east of Asher. And the problem with people before trying to find Eden was that they were thinking about it had to be over in Israel or somewhere close to Israel, and it was probably this little small garden plot area, like a big zoo or a park. Huh. And I said, no. Let's let God have bigger scale, because he had to have all those animals for Adam and Eve and for Adam to name, and he had to have food and shelter for them. It had to be an enclosed area, because a gan, which is Hebrew for garden, a gan is a hedged-in area to keep things out and to keep things in. And so I thought, right, okay. Thinking that kind of scale, then these little rivers are not going to be, a wadi somewhere in the North Saudi desert or, in northern Israel or anything like that. Let's look at the big picture. So I had a company, first time I looked at this, I had a company down in Perth to build the North Africa and the Saudi Peninsula and part of Europe, build it in 3D. In those days, that was pretty expensive, but they did it for a really cheap price for me. They have a company called Esri now that models, the whole globe. They've grown really big into $1 billion company, but when I knew it was just all the guys that started the company. And so they built this 3D map for me so I could spin it around and look for depressions where a river, might have been. And since I had signposts like Asher, we know where Asher is, so something had to go east of that, the Tigris. And okay, so doing it that way, I could see that there were four. Well, immediately I could see there were three riverbeds that were big. One went up the Red Sea, or it could have been what's in Egypt, the Nile. It could have been the Nile. It could have been the Red Sea. There was two pathways. They were big. Okay, and then I saw that if it was the Red Sea or the Nile, they came down into what's now the Mediterranean. But when the continents were all together, that was a coastal river that ran along the west coast of the Levant, Israel and the countries there like Syria, the tips of it, things like that, and the Lebanon. And then it went up into the mountains close to Turkey. And then I looked at Yemen, and I could see that Yemen and the Red Sea, they're down there at a point, and there's a port actually named by the Arabs, and the people who lived there for thousands of years. It's called the Port of Eden. It's pronounced Aden in the local language, but it's the Port of Eden. So why did they name that part of Eden? Okay, well, three big rivers came from that one spot there out of the Danakil Plains. But the fourth one wasn't immediately available. So I thought maybe it was a smaller one, and that was for the book in 1989. Well, now then, in 2016, I revisited it with much better software and data, and the sea maps or terrain maps I got from the Scripps Institute over in California and from Google Earth. And I put these together and flew over the Middle East looking for that fourth river at a bigger size, because it went all the way around the country. And the one I thought it would have been just didn't have those characteristics. And I found it. But I found it by tracing the source of water for the three rivers that came out of the Port of Aden area, Djibouti there, the Danakil Plain. Those three rivers I could identify immediately and fit, with the biblical context. But the fourth one, around a land that was known for its gold, didn't follow those. It came from the same river source, but it came at about a 90-degree angle down from that source of water down into the Western Pacific Ocean, or Western Indian Ocean. So I thought, right, okay, well, I traced the rivers that I knew back up to a huge river that fed them up in, it's to the Great East African Rift. And I followed that river up there, up. And where I found it came from was on the top of a 9,500-foot mountain in a plateau where the water had come up out of the ground and dug these great trenches, huge gorges, with those three rivers. And I found the fourth one come from that, but it was at 90 degrees, and then it fell off the side and went out into what is now the place where Madagascar was attached. And Madagascar was the one that was known for its gold and surrounded by this one river until everything broke apart. Now, so many things happened after that. I found in the research that Madagascar was one of three places that King Solomon got his gold. It was the finest gold of all the places he got his gold, because it was like fine sand grains of gold in the rivers there in northeastern Madagascar, coming down from the granite mountains that had all the gold flake in it that washed down. A very pure and highly treasured gold. Even now, I mean, the Chinese and the French are mining it as well still. And where Madagascar and the gold fields connected to India, it's called the Karnataka region of India. That's their gold field. And in Tanzania, that's gold as well, which touched on to the north part of Madagascar. It's a whole belt of gold that went through there. And one of the mysteries of Solomon's mines I found was that King Solomon had the gold of Parvaim, Parvaim, Parvaim. Okay, they didn't know that in Hebrew. What's a Parvaim gold place? Well, his men took their ships over into the Indus River Valley, which was a lot closer then than now. They sailed up, it took them several months to get there, and they met with the Indians, the mystics there, who had books of the history of India, right? The books are called Parva, Parva, in the Indian language. So they named the place the Gold of Parvaim, where the Parva books were. Okay, it's a male singular, like im.
Yeah.
Okay, it's plural actually. If you say, Zamzumim, you're talking about plural giants or whatever. But anyway, so that was one of his sources of gold as well. And then the other one was in the Mediterranean up into Morocco, where they traded for elephants and African animals and gold. And that's the gold of Tarshish, which, of course, in the local language, tar meant, opium tar. And a shisha is one of those glass or ceramic bowls with two holes in it where you smoke your dope, your tar. And from Morocco and Spain, that's where it was. And so that tells us that Solomon's gold source at Tarshish was really Tarshisha, where, in Morocco, where all these apes and plumaged birds and stuff, like peacocks and things, where they found all those things to trade for that source of gold. So I found all three sources of his gold. And in fact, recently I was talking to some members of the Knights Templar, and I told them about this, and they said, "Yeah, we know. We've already taken a lot of the gold out and stored it in a safe place now."
Interesting.
Oh, I nearly fell off my chair. I said, "Well, okay, guys, and you know what I'm talking about." So, yeah. Now, getting back to the search for the Garden of Eden.
Before you go there, I find it ironic that a lot of the countries that are the richest in the gold are not rich countries. All the wealth has gone elsewhere.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that. That's very true.
Yeah. That's digressing a bit, but that's what I'm thinking as I'm hearing you say this. Anyway, carry on. Yes.
Look, even today, the gold mining they're doing in Madagascar, which is probably the richest of all those, they're working young children, native children, for pens, and they're dying, from the work conditions, and it's being taken offshore somewhere else. It's true. I'm sad about that.
Yeah.
But look at all the gemstones and stuff you get in Africa, in Tanzania and the Congo. The gemstones, if you see, as we saw, the mining conditions, there's a hole in the ground. And, okay, they kind of shore up some of them, but a lot of them are just pits that are dug into the sides of hills. These guys are muddy and half-dressed and, terrible work conditions to get these, rubies and sapphires and diamonds and stuff that people treasure. but the locals, they don't see that much of it. The
Yeah,
money.
yeah, exactly. Well, maybe the government officials do, but not the local
No,
rank and file people. Yes.
no, it's just so sad to watch it.
Yeah.
Really sad.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, that's probably for another discussion. But well, look, I mean, uh, Jared and Christina that went down there with me, we saw all this, and it just really ripped our heart out. And so, when we came back, I organized a fund for people to donate money for us to help two villages that we saw. Our guide came, both guides came from these villages right next to each other, to just get them water. Just to be able to have water every day, even if they have to carry the 5-gallon jugs to get it there, with the drought on, they don't even have enough to get that 5 gallons of water per household every day. Unless they've got mud and crap in it. I mean, it's just terrible water. So we raised the funds and drilled down about 370 feet in the side of a volcano, which would feed both villages. And we got down to the damp soil and ran out of money. So we're now going back for some more donations to finish that. But it moved us because we saw every day people with some water balanced on their head, women walking to and from the water source in town or wherever the nearest well was, to take home 5 gallons, which would give them water to cook, water to bathe, and that's it for a family. And here, you and I sit here, we turn on a faucet and, brush my teeth, yawn, and now then when I look at that, I feel guilty.
Yeah, and especially, like I say, because those countries there and have all that wealth in the ground, the precious metals and the diamonds and so on, and yet they're not the ones that are actually enjoying it. It's all the rest of us that have had the opulent lifestyle by comparison. It's kind of all topsy-turvy, really.
Tony, you and I and people in the Western nations, these advanced nations, we live like absolute kings compared to them.
Yeah.
One of the questions that my guide spoke 3, maybe 4 languages, and he said to me, while we were bouncing on a trail somewhere in the Jeep, he says, tell me, I've heard that in America they have these machines that you put money into and it makes Coca-Cola come out in a bottle for you. Like vending machines.
Yeah.
And they don't even know about that, but they'd heard a rumor of it. I mean, something so common. Oh, yeah. Anyway, I'm on my soapbox. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a bit of an interesting digression, but we better get back to the Garden of Eden, I suppose.
Yep.
Not that we can go back to the Garden of Eden, if you know what I mean.
Well, you can go back to the region, but it's definitely not the garden any longer.
Yeah.
It's suffered the ravages of time and the hand of God keeping it all fertile and beautiful. But anyway, I traced these 4 rivers, and believe me, it took me months of going over by several hundred feet at a time by riverbeds, tracing them where they were, where they are in Tanzania, to see that for sure they all came from the same source, and trace it and then outline it. And they all came from one kind of big hole in the ground at 9,500 feet altitude in the northwest section of the Ngoro Plateau, where the Ngoro crater is. Now, I can see on Google Earth maps and various other flyover maps that I can get a hold of that right in the center of this cup, it's not like a volcanic cone or a crater that's right next to it, but this is a cup surrounded by peaks on that plateau. And that cup in the very bottom of it is green. It's got periodic water I can see in the satellite maps. So it required that we hire a couple guides and guards, guns and stuff to get in there. So we trekked up into the northern part of the Ngoro crater in May. And we got to this site. There's a native word for it that the Maasai give to it, but it means like a precious jewel, a gem, something greatly prized. Of course, water is. And people from down the slopes from there come up every day with their donkeys and get water from the springs that are still active there that used to supply the water to these 4 great rivers that separated the continents. And so we did go up there, and we met one Maasai woman there. She could navigate the ruts and stuff that we had to get through by foot a lot quicker than we could, and she didn't even have boots on. But
And did you say it was 9,500 feet up?
Yeah.
Yes, well, because that's amazing. I mean, in the US or New Zealand, of course, that'd be snow, but not in Africa.
Well, no, it was. We had clouds that we actually walked through. It's the cloud height was. I mean, it was like fog, I guess, but you'd see the cloud coming, and then you'd be walking in the clouds at 9,500.
Yeah, it's pretty high.
The rim was around 10,000 feet. We had to descend down into it to the lower levels. But if you look in the Hebrew, one of the clues was that the river that supplied the water to the garden and the four rivers of Eden that came out of there, the water came up out of the land of Eden and watered the Garden of Eden in the east. Well, if that's the case, then Lake Victoria, which is right next to the Ngoro crater in the garden, huge amounts of water, huge, like 40 volcanoes around there showing a huge underground thermal activity that could very well have forced the water to gush up in a super geyser up at the top at 9,500 feet and spread out like a tree. And that's part of what the word in Hebrew looks like. It's like a tree with limbs coming out. But if you look at the Mississippi, it starts at a little spring up in, where is it, in Montana, Missouri, way over in North Central America. And it's joined by other rivers eventually. And that becomes a mighty Mississippi River discharging, millions of gallons of water a day. But this one up here at the altitude it was, not only discharged a lot of water, but it discharged it with a lot of force. When you add, like a 7,000 foot drop to the water accelerated by gravity, that's big. And you can see the mysterious chasms that were dug on the side of the Ngoro crater or the Ngoro plateau. They couldn't figure out why until I showed them, look, here it is. And I took the what do you call them? The ranger from the Ngoro Conservancy there that governs all that. And I said, come with me and I will show you the waters that eroded that. And so now it's a new thing they add on to their visitor attractions, that they will take small groups of people up to there as visitors to see where the waters of the Garden of Eden and the waters that came out of Eden all came from that one spot.
I'm just thinking maybe you should spell out the name for people in case they want to look it up and how to spell Ngoro.
All right. Ngoro is two words together. It means big holes in the local language, but it's Ngoro and then Ngoro again. Ngoro.
Right.
And the Maasai were moved in there. They moved in and had war with the Toga tribes who had been there for 2,000 or 3,000 years. Moved them down southeast of the crater. I met with both tribes, but so the legends are kind of spotty between the two, about the area. But most of them say that was where man started, where God put man and then left. He went up into the sky after he put man down in the Ngoro crater. Now, so we found the place where the water came out and found how it channeled right down into the garden, which is the Ngoro crater. And this crater is 100 square miles. It's the only crater like this that still has all the walls intact. It's a perfect sealed garden even today. Now, wildlife can come up and go over the rim nowadays from the higher part of the plateau and go down into the garden and, stay there. And at the moment, about 25,000 large animals like lions and wildebeest and elephants, these big animals live down there year round. They don't migrate because it's just a perfect environment down inside this crater. I mean, it's just, it's beautiful. But anyway, a lot of grass grows there, and it grows so luxuriantly that while we were there, we were meeting with some of the agricultural people who were guarded also by the security teams there, and they were taking samples of dirt from one part of the bottom of this crater here in the garden, because things in this part of the crater grew even better than the rest of the crater. There's an anomalous growth of grasses and things, really rich, and they wanted to find out why. And so they had rangers, and we had rangers, and Where they were searching for it was on a hill, a round table-looking hill that popped up. Oh, it was probably maybe 60, 70 feet altitude above the rest of the crater floor, but a perfect round circle on top with grass. And it was obviously probably the top of the volcano mountain, thousands of years even before the garden was formed. That when it collapsed and fell down to make this collapsed volcanic crater, that the very top of it became this round kind of table of dirt with layers in it, geological layers you can see on the side of it. And in fact, out of about the second geological layer down from the very top of it, all around the rim were fig trees growing out of the side of this hill. Mm. Now you can see this hill from anywhere in the garden, in the floor of the crater. From the hill, the table hill, it's called Engatati. From the top where you stand on it, you can see anywhere in the crater floor as well. So it could be seen from anywhere, and particularly Adam and Eve could see this little raised portion in the garden from anywhere in the garden. And we found two places. That hill is not a large table hill. It's probably I'm guessing about 6 car lengths across and about the same thing the other way. But it was slightly divided into two sections where water flowed down. And the two sections were big enough to each have a tree, like the tree of life, the tree of knowledge. And remember when Eve ate the tree of knowledge, she knew she was naked and grabbed fig leaves from right there on the site to make her clothes. The fig leaves are there. The high ground is there. The water was there. The trees weren't there any longer, obviously. But this could have been seen by anywhere in the garden by Adam and Eve. And when God said, "Look, see those trees?" He could have had them up on the hill. He could have had them anywhere in the garden and said, "See those trees?" And I said, "Yeah, those are different than everything else you got around. You can eat all the rest of the stuff, but don't you go up there and get those trees." It was easy for them to know that they were doing something wrong because they were set apart, and that's the area set apart. So we think that Engatati Hill is where the original sin of Eve happened.
Wow, that's amazing.
I know. We stood there just quiet, all of us, the guides and everybody. We had Christian guides and guards, and we all just stood around and just looked, and were quiet there in the still of the day, because we had come at a time between the seasons when we were the only one of 2 Jeeps in 100 square miles, and so we could stand up there, feel the breeze, and realize thousands of years ago this is where it all started. It was just cool.
That would be quite an amazing experience, actually, to have that thought.
We knew we were going to head for that place, and so Christina, who's a jeweler, she made about 6 coins, the minted 6 coins of silver, and imprinted on them the outline of the Holengoro Plateau on one side, and on the other side a big elephant, commemorating the day that we proved the discovery, Stan Deyo's discovery of the Garden of Eden in 2018. And we buried one there in Engatati Hill, and we tossed one into the river. Actually, I got a video of me tossing it into the waters of Eden up at the top. So we deposited 2 coins there that commemorate the event. And then we gave our guides each one mounted on a necklace for them. Wow.
And so your original lectures are available still on DVD?
Yeah, they're on DVD. The book is going to be better because I've learned so much more. And the video that I can start to process now, we shot it on a Sony 4K video professional camera. But as I say, people were talking sometimes when they shouldn't and ruined some of the sound effects in certain scenes we shot. So it takes a while to edit around it. And of course, the Jeep, we didn't have a stabilizer on the thing, and we couldn't use drones. We were not permitted to use drones. So there's software available for the Mac that allows us to, if you're on a bumpy road, to take that video and put it through a smoother, and it evens out the vibrations of bumpiness of it. And so it's a very lazy kind of swaying as you go down, and it's really mystical what this stuff does. It makes it look. Final Cut Pro does that, and then we do the rest of the editing with Premiere. We were there talking about Engatati Hill. We were standing there where Adam and Eve had stood. We were pretty certain of that. And so we drove on down from there, down into the crater floor. It's only, 50, 60 feet lower, but drove around and we saw just as far as the eye could see, yellow daisies, African daisies, covered the floor of the crater. And there were other smaller little purple flowers mixed in with it. And this was just coming out of the rainy season. And in the distance, we could see and pick it up on our cameras with a telephoto, were 2 or 3 elephants just wandering around having their breakfast next to a herd of wildebeest who were next to a herd of zebras. Everybody just walking around having a good time together. And as we drove further around to the southern part of the floor of the crater, there were a bunch of lions sitting in a tree. Oh, a broken tree falling over and whatever. And there was little cubs playing around, and we were so close. I mean, probably 10 foot. And just, we were sitting there filming them and talking to them and, watching them scratch. And here these lions. And then we looked over and we saw some more of them laying in a field of gazelles, Thompson's gazelles, which is their food source. Yeah. And nobody was running or anything like that. They know that the lions only take the old ones, or the sick animals. Yeah. And so they don't fear them.
Amazing.
So, yeah. And rhinos, the black rhinos are so rare. They took us to the secret place where they knew, the guys knew where these rhinos hide. And there they were laying on their back and scratching like a dog would do out there, scratching his back in the grass. Just, hey, how you going? Okay. And amazing. Just the peace of the place is something that's hard to duplicate anywhere else. There's just the silence except for life around, an occasional bird call and the wind, a little bit of wind in the trees. Wow.
Yeah, that would be pretty special.
And there have been a number of people over the last 10 years that we've been reading reports of people that hire tour guides to take them over to the Ngoro crater, because it's a neat place and everything, Africa's Garden of Eden. And they're saying this was the Garden of Eden. It has to be. It's so peaceful, so beautiful.
Yeah.
And it was the Garden of Eden. And I proved it now with the geographic locations and the functions and the 4 rivers and all that kind of stuff. So that is and was the Garden of Eden in its in its heyday. And this is the remnants of the original Garden of Eden.
That's fascinating.
It is, Tony. It is. And I just don't understand why people in the world today aren't saying, holy cow, wow, can I go? Strangely, since I've said that and done the lectures and things, the bookings for people to go through there are so many now. They have to add toilet places on the rim for people to take potty breaks so they don't do it down in the crater.
Yeah.
Nearly 750,000 guests a year are coming there to see it. And it's to the point now where they're trying to figure out whether they can let that many people come and look at it anymore. There are too many visitors.
Yeah.
So, even President Clinton went there, and Prince Charles and his boys went there. The Prime Minister of Japan went there. It is a place that the rich and famous know about, and that now that we're hoping the rest of the people of the world will know about.
Yes, well, it'll be very interesting when you do bring your new book out and the video about all of this. Gosh, I think that'll be, probably kickstart more people to go there.
Well, I'm hoping that what they will do is film it in high def and go all the way around it and through it and document it, like a National Geographic documentary, to preserve it for people as it is now. During the season, in June, July, August, when it's hotter actually, the path that you have to follow going around so you don't disturb the vegetation and the animals is packed bumper to bumper around the perimeter of this, and it's like 10 miles across. So it's about 30 miles worth of road around there that the Jeeps are bumper to bumper, people trying to see it. It tells you the interest that's there. But fortunately, when we went, we were the only ones there except that other Jeep up the road. And that was probably the best time, the best way to see it. There's a private tour of the Garden of Eden. Just
yeah, that's pretty amazing. Pretty fascinating. Yep.
Okay. All right. Now, all right, Garden of Eden. Was there something else I needed to say about that? Well, we visited some graves there of the great chiefs of the Datoga that were up in the north at the Three Trees holy site. And even though the Datoga tribe were beaten by the Maasai and kicked out 180 years ago or so, the Datoga are allowed by the government to come back in for 3 days of each year to perform, religious ceremonies and honor their dead there. And so we were allowed to go to the graveyard and see the graves of all the great chiefs of the Datoga, which were many. Anyway, that's enough. We'll talk about that some more another time as I remember things. But
Yes, well, that's been absolutely fascinating. And gosh, yeah, I think it's been, I don't even think we had you on the show at all in 2018. I think maybe a few times in 2017. Well, gosh, have to make sure we don't leave it so long next time.
All right, well, we can talk about Atlantis next time and all the secret military bases that Mohammed bin Salman's I've put in there. I've found 3 of them at the moment, and got an overhead satellite imagery source that was really highly detailed so that you can count the cars in the parking lot and stuff. And so this one is probably the missile site he's going to use to make the nukes at Iran and possibly at Israel eventually if he threatens them with it. But he's certainly building missiles that are capable of carrying nuclear bombs. So it's not a matter of if, he's already doing it.
Yep. Okay. So that would sound like a very good thing to come back and discuss sometime fairly soon, because I've been pretty interested in following what bin Salman's doing as well. So, yep, Stan, we'll have to do that. Now, can you just tell people your website and make sure that everyone knows where they can actually find you?
Sure. Our website, which Holly updates 6 days a week, is called standeyo.com. STANDEYO.com. And once you get there, you can read the articles of the day that she's put up, and you'll see up in the area at the top of the website page, the splash page, you'll see photo of the day and things like that. And if you look over to the right of that, you'll see links to my YouTube channel, and also to something called Show Images. And if you click on Show Images, it'll take you over to a selection of 6 shows that I do regularly. But you'll want to go to the one that says Hagman Show. And that's the most current one. I update that every week when I do a show there. And then I'll do another one tomorrow. And there I have maybe 50 to 60 icon slides that you can click on and read sub-stories. Some stay there all the time. Some are only there for the week, news stories. But you'll find that quite interesting looking at, say, like our line of jewelry that Christina has made to honor the Garden of Eden trip. And, the whole concept of it. Or you can read about EMP Shield, where, we've made this EMP Shield for homes and businesses to use and are now expanding into making them for the government. Then there's slide 13, believe it or not, lucky number 13, is where I analyze about 6 different world figures for possible candidates for the Antichrist of this age. And of all the 6, there's only one who has more marks that fill prophecy than the others, and that's Mohammed bin Salman. So I could be wrong. I know there are people that say they're expecting to have a revived Roman Empire in Europe. And, I keep telling them, look, okay, it's the 2 legs of the Roman Empire. Rome's in the middle of the Western world and the Eastern world, and they're both the former parts of the Roman Empire. And this will include all those. And so we can have an Arab Antichrist. So anyway.
That's definitely interesting. And I've been watching Mohammed bin Salman ever since you first started talking about him, quite a few years ago now. And so, yes, we'll have to come back and discuss that soon.
That sounds like a plan, Tony. We better do it before it's all over, hey?
Yeah. Well, thank you for being on the show again today, Stan. It's been a really awesome discussion.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Tony.
Folks, don't forget to like this video and share it, and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already done so, and visit our website at minutetomidnight.com. All our shows are found on YouTube, and they're also on iTunes and on our website, as well as articles on the website, and the ability for you to donate to A Minute to Midnight if you want, which we'd much appreciate, since we do run this completely by donations, and so donations are always a big help. And all the music is written, played and recorded by me, and if you want to download A Minute to Midnight's free music, you can do that on the website as well. So thanks for listening and tuning in today. We'll be back with another show very soon. Until then, God bless, have a great week, and this is Tony saying goodbye.